Testing, testing, 1, 2, 3. Testing, testing. 1, 2, 3. Testing, testing. 1, 2, 3. Okay, so the audio works. All right, so we're not going to mess with any music then. That's probably for the better. Okay, so all right, I'm gonna make sure I stay a certain distance away from the microphone here, so because it's super sensitive, this thing. Still figuring out the little ins and outs of it all. So, on today's agenda, we've got some interesting information. So again, we are gonna go ahead and keep it positive, guys. I'm excited about tonight's episode. A lot of cool stuff to talk about. Again, let's hold these corporate overlords accountable here. These corporate elitists that want to pretend like they can hijack our movement to go green. You know. So, but we have to listen to all ideas with an open mind. So that being said, I found a really cool, interesting article. I don't know if you guys have heard about this, but 15-minute cities. So some people are upset about it, like this guy. This article is by Shifted In. Yeah, apparently it's a socialist concept that will cost us our personal freedom. Kind of crazy. So I don't necessarily think it's a bad idea, but I don't know if it's a good idea either. Urbanization in general seems to be a trend that is inevitable, but here's one guy's plan. It's town planning academics who have published research on 15-minute cities. We know this nonsense, but what actually is the 15-minute city, and what's the fuss about? The 15-minute city itself is a simple idea. If you live in one, it means that everything you need to go about your daily life, school, doctors, shops, and so on, is located no more than a 15-minute walk from your house. The concept, which originated from the French Colombian urbanist Carlos Moreno, is the current zeitgeist in planning and calls for the city design that is centered on people and their needs rather than designed for cars. It gained international attention when the mayor of Paris, Anne Hidalgo, announced her intention to make Paris a 15-minute walk city following her re-election in 2020 with the plan to enhance neighborhoods across Paris. The idea flourished in the wake of COVID when lockdowns and work from home had more of a stitch in cars. Yeah, so they're calling this idea Stalinist and socialist. some people. The reality is the 15-minute city does not seek to exclude people or to prevent people from leaving. Instead, the idea is about providing high-quality neighborhoods so that you don't have to travel further to get the service. Crucially, this doesn't mean you are trapped where you live. Yeah, I think this is all an idea to just design cities around not having vehicles. I think ultimately that's probably a good idea. I've always said, where is our inventors? They're going to come out with the next vehicles, modes of transportation for human beings that aren't cars, and whether that's some sort of flying thing or some sort of new train enhancements. I think it's a really cool concept to ponder the future of getting around, because 150 years ago we were riding around on horses and buggies. And, what an interesting change in what's relatively very little time. So where we'll be in 50 years. Yeah, past hacking. Let's see if we can figure it out. So this just gets super political and it's kind of boring. I don't like politics, but interesting idea, guys. Everybody's coming up with ways to cope with climate change, and I don't know how I feel about this one. I'm a big believer in homesteading and that kind of thing, and I don't know though, because the future, if we build a future around collective, ideals, maybe these so-called smart cities and the social engineers that are designing them have the best intentions in mind. I don't think it's a bad idea to experiment with some of these in certain places and have some beta rollout cities where this kind of stuff is tested out. I mean, we got to get creative. Anything really helps. Any ideas, and apparently this one seems to be pretty popular. Obviously there's, like any idea, anything new is going to have a certain amount of pushback. But more importantly, this moves on to our next topic here from the Climate Change Review about the curriculum, teaching kids about climate change. So this is a hot button issue on designing curriculums around climate change. So again, I don't know how I feel about it, but I think it's definitely something that families and parents and should encourage their kids to get hobbies that that are about restoring the environment and good living spaces. And I do believe it needs to be in schools as well, but so many of these school districts tend to overthink it. So we'll see what Keita Bradley has to say about the situation. So, the unwillingness of the education system to design a curriculum around climate change reinforces education and environmental racism. When climate change innovates and initiatives are defunded, so is education, vice versa. Let me zoom in here. Despite the huge political platform that the climate movement seems to have, it does not make or break most candidates' ability to get voted into most public office in the U.S., even though it should. The issue of decapitalized education system creates the environment where educating an American youth about climate crisis is at best difficult, at worst neglected, and treated as a political issue rather than as an important concept to help guide learning in America's classrooms. Understanding the climate crisis and its different scientific and social facets should guide curriculum standards in the U.S. I don't disagree with that. We need to make kids aware, not just about climate crisis in general, but biology, microbiology, environmentalism, conservation. We need to get the kids out of the classrooms more and get them into these environments, quite literally. I don't know if you guys have seen this show Scared Straight and other shows like it, but you know, those are just bully reality TV shows. But the reality is, I think that kind of mentality is good. Maybe we should have field trip days where we take some of these kids on clean up the park days. I don't think that's a bad idea. Anybody who argues against that, I think, is silly. That's a good way to get kids early on focused on, not just the reality of climate change, but clean up after yourself, all this kind of stuff. So, and then in the classroom itself, yeah, obviously, get them involved in agriculture earlier, get them involved in all kinds of things that relate to the natural environment. I think all of that is good and does need to be introduced into curriculum a little bit more. So we'll go on here. Teachers struggle to explain to parents and communities that the climate crisis is not a two-sided issue, but a detrimental problem that plagues our world. The social aspect of the crisis is what affects children more than it does their teachers. Children in low-income households are at risk of enduring environmental racist policies such as oil drilling in their neighborhood, freshwater pollution, and water management that favors affluent neighborhoods. I mean, this is obviously true, but at the end of the day, this has reached a point where it's so bad that even the affluent neighborhoods aren't immune to the ecological disaster that is unfolding before our eyes. So, I mean, pretty soon, how much of the planet is going to be in a clean living space where, air isn't polluted or water isn't destroyed, soil isn't ruined? Who knows? Unless we have a massive reversal of how we think and behave, who knows where we're going to be in 10, 20, 30 years. So again, this is a really tough issue to tackle, but it needs to be talked about. So children living in poverty in low-income countries with weak governance and poor education systems are the hardest hit by climate change. As the crisis grows larger, it gets worse. Those children will have to face migration, domestic security issues. Other children in Mexico, Zimbabwe, Bangladesh have had to. Yeah, I mean, this is nothing new. I mean, I think all throughout history, when there's a climate crisis or a food crisis or any type of crisis, there's going to be mass migration. And the whole problem is if we have planet-wide ecological collapse, there's going to be nowhere else to migrate to. And I think that's really what a lot of people, especially conservatives, need to understand. We do live on a planet with finite resources. And until we invent ways to create infinite energy or infinite resources, which is just, at this point, science fiction, we gotta change our behaviors. We gotta change the way we think and about how we approach these things. All right, let me double check to make sure this audio is still going here. So yeah, okay, you can hear me from this far away, so that's good. Testing. Yeah, there's so much echoing and stuff, and I gotta make sure that I gotta do some sounding in this room. I gotta get some. The stuff's so expensive to sound the room properly, though. And who knows? I don't know how excited the wife will be to have this converted into a literal podcast studio, but one day at a time, right, guys? So, yeah, I digress. As we go on here, methods for implementing the climate curriculum. To properly display to students and the community the urgency in responding personally to the climate crisis, schools need to be built in a climate-proof and friendly manner that prioritizes sustainability and waste reduction. As well as multi-hazard resilient, schools can be in the process of becoming sustainable by developing intricate water reclamation systems to use all available water and developing sanitation systems that are adaptable to change in rainfall in drought-prone regions. Such changes have the benefit of helping reduce freshwater usage, decreasing the impact on state irrigation systems, leaving more water for the community. To continue in a climate-friendly direction, designs and maintenance of campuses need to promote mitigation with policies and technology that work with the environment and region and do not add to already existing environmental issues. Schools can set a goal of carbon neutral so that students and faculty can work together on a climate action plan. To go one step further, communities must be involved in practicing early warnings, simulation drills, evacuation for expected and recurring disasters. School districts should also invest green energy school buses for the following purposes: to encourage more carpooling and emphasis on its benefits, to reduce gas consumption in family households, and to help in the case of climate-related emergencies. And all of these changes set an example for students in the community on how to properly mitigate and adapt to the climate crisis, but they also need to understand why those changes are important. Yeah, no doubt. I mean, all that's good, but I think you can go one step further than that and create more after-school programs where you're taking these kids out into nature more, and literally doing hands-on type stuff. I think that's part of learning. There should be more field trip oriented stuff, and yeah, obviously if you can field them in more green ways and more carbon neutral ways, obviously that's great. You know, I think it's there's an infinite amount of ideas that you can just talk about, and start a forest. K through 12, the kids go out there and plant a forest every year, K through 12. By the time they graduate high school, they've created an entire ecosystem, an entire park that they can then eventually bring their kids into, and they can add more to the school garden, you can call it, or whatever, and name it after somebody important who's doing beneficial work to improve our planet. So yeah, I mean, this is kind of stuff that we should be talking about in every community all across the country, and how we literally start rolling out policies to introduce this kind of stuff into the curriculum. So don't be skeptical about the reality of the situation. This is something that everybody needs to come together on: conservative and Democrat, capitalists, communists, whatever you want to call it, rich or poor. I think this is now something that with each consecutive ecological disaster, one after the other, it becomes so much like all these other things, where we're just so saturated with bad news, we forget about it. But it's endless. We think we just, and on all the warfare too, we just blew the whole BP spill in the Gulf. People forget about that, but that was a huge disaster. And Nord Stream 2 getting blown up, another huge disaster. So we keep shooting ourselves in the foot, with one step forward and two steps backward here, type of mentality. And it's crazy. It's truly crazy. We are a schizophrenic culture, I guess you could say, on the issue. And I don't know. I don't have all the solutions. I think talking about it, and this climate change review is doing some good stuff. And yeah, don't be afraid to talk about this stuff. And the people that say the climate change deniers, like, oh, this is just the regular fluctuation of the planet, and we have nothing to do with it. Keep yourself armed with facts, and always, just explain to them that everything especially something this complex, is so nuanced. It's not that simple. Whether or not humans are having an effect on the climate and our planet in every ecological way, to me, there's no question. And to most people, with half of a brain, obviously, we are having an effect on our living environment, not just for ourselves, but the entire, but all other species, plant, animal, whatever, what have you. So just tell everybody, approach these things with open minds when you're talking about this stuff, and always try to keep a positive tone to it. Really, there's no need to fight each other over this stuff. I mean, this is, for the most part, on a base level, all stuff we agree on is, living and raising kids in an educational, safe, clean environment. So here's some main points. Diverse perspectives. Students have to feel heard on the issue, no matter the viewpoint. The curriculum needs to be personally relevant and meaningful to students and their families. It has to be engaging. Yeah, I mean that's key too. You got to get these kids excited about cleaning stuff up. Get kids excited about what my whole channel is about, restoring old items. Um, you know, trash isn't trash. It is trash if it ends up in a landfill, then it becomes trash. But if you can get your hands on it before that happens, then you can make that trash novelty again. You can transform it into something new, make it nice again. And it's easy to do. It's just such a cool hobby to get into. Um, and if we got our kids excited about that and engage them, one of my favorite things to do as a kid, in Boy Scouts, everybody throws shade at Boy Scouts, but by far the coolest thing about Boy Scouts was the Pinewood Derby. They'd give you a little block piece of wood, and you'd have to create your own car and compete. And it was, competitive but fun, and it made us learn a little bit about, math and measuring and just those type of activities turn on the creative side of their brain, which is completely excluded, or not completely, but mostly excluded from our learning environments in Western culture. And I think that's another reason why we're falling behind in the Western world. Here in the USA is just we're so divided on so many things. And I forget who it was that said it, but civilization is a race between education and disaster. I forget. Somebody let's look that up a bit. The point is, we got to properly educate everybody, and we got to rethink our many industries. So, going on here. Most science and social science classrooms in America prioritize research above all else, which is beneficial in introducing young learners to higher education. However, those classrooms neglect to include indigenous climate information in their lesson plans. While some believe that scientific knowledge relating to the climate crisis needs to be enhanced by education policymakers and climate research, I believe that they need to focus on including more indigenous input in curriculum design. I do too. And this is a huge thing for my spiritual hero and, intellectual hero, Terence McKenna. We need to accept ideas from most of our evolutionary history. And for most of our evolutionary history, we were a lot more of obviously population size was much different, but we were a much more interconnected community, like indigenous communities. And we were a lot more aware of the dichotomous relationship between us and the earth and us and all other species. So we need to have an archaic revival, as Terence puts it, and kind of design civilization around a shamanistic, archaic type archetype with motifs that with a motif that really emphasizes on land management, conservation, lifestyle, agricultural methods, lifestyle, all this kind of stuff that is a completely dichotomous to what we do now. We need to create a civilization where we're living in harmony with the planet and not destroying it for a profit and for corporations to make exorbitant amounts of money on squeezing every last dollar they can by managing, natural resources and endless planned obsolescence. Another cool quote from one of my favorites. McLuhan says we're just the sex organs of machines. We only exist to build next year's model car. This constant innovation, which isn't bad. I don't think, but capitalism may be the answer. Because if you kind of look at where it's taken us, up until this point, it's obviously off the rails for the past, century or so, I would say. We've kind of drifted away from the initial idea in the same way that communism drifted away from its initial ideas. You know, Terrence says all ideologies are bad, and I kind of agree. But, you know, maybe if we had a capitalism where instead of producing material things, we produced ideas. And we based our civilizations off of using our imagination. And, yeah, I believe he also references, I forget which indigenous tribe it was, where they had a very interesting form of governance capitalism where they would produce things and share them and purchase them in, you know, in a similar way that we do now, but they would burn these things, whether whether it was a super expensive item or, you know, a trash item, whatever it was. After its use, they would burn it. So we'll get into that later, but there's just so many different ways to approach the future of how we're going to design society and schooling and education and industry. And yeah, so it's cool to talk about this stuff. So I agree. We do need to get more environmentalism and conservation and ecology and biology, intertwine that with STEM classes into our curriculums. I couldn't agree more. So, yeah, this goes on to say, due to the gaps in knowledge in America's youth, most do not give much thought to the difference in the equal importance of mitigation techniques and adaptation solutions. Discussions are often one-sided on social media, as most individuals discuss how to mitigate the climate crisis. While humanity can certainly halt many of the activities that accelerate climate change, we are also at the point of no return, according to most environmental scientists, and this is true. So, I mean, this is unarguably true. And, you know, anybody, right or left, that tries to argue with the fact that we are literally on as Dane Wigington says, go check out his channel at geoengineeringwatch.org. I'll give him another plug on this week's live stream too. We've collectively driven through the guardrail, off of the mountain, and are tumbling down the edge of the mountain. At this point, there may be no way to reverse the damage that's already been done. And you can just reference the ecological disaster after disaster going back the last 150 years. And, you know, honestly, that's the best argument against capitalism, is that it has put us so far behind with just manipulating human behavior and destroying the environment in the process. We need to move away from a type of capitalism that produces material goods and move into a type of capitalism where ideas are traded. So, you know, and I'm not saying it because novelty obviously has value, and producing new things is valuable. You know, like Terrence says, and I believe it to be wholly true, novelty is the engine of civilization. So we just need to nuance. We need to kind of enhance what we're producing and how we're producing it, and change our behavior where we're not exploiting the planet and its finite amount of resources for, you know, a couple of new bells and whistles on the latest phone or the latest car or whatever, what have you. We need to just find a way to tap back into nature a little bit and you know, consume a little less and produce more novelty in the form of art, in the form of ideas, you know, that kind of thing. So we go on here. When educators are not battling politicians, unrealistic and harmful policies, unruly parents, overzealous religious leaders, watered down textbooks, and over-demanding education systems, they must also fend off misinformation, which often comes from those aforementioned groups. Sometimes that misinformation, outdated or false knowledge, comes directly from the teacher. To give a true and accurate information to students, teachers should review the information they plan and share it in their lesson plan. Yeah, so I mean, this harkens back to this parents. It's on parents for you at home when the kids are out of school to be taking your kids to activities that, you know, are healthy, that are getting them aware about, you know, the environment and how important it is, and how important it is to reduce, you know, and not waste, reduce how much you're using, and you know, like a balanced algebra equation, you know, you want to produce more than you consume. So that's pretty important stuff. But yeah, guys, I think we'll skip the Terrence part for today. I'm gonna go ahead and maybe do a second episode this week. I think we're gonna maybe do 2 of these a week in the future. So yeah, thanks so much for joining in. Like I said, let's keep all this kind of stuff at the top of our brains, and focus on better ways to live and actively live in the green revolution. So appreciate y'all, really do. Love ya. Peace.